I just want to start with a brief introduction. My name is Michaela Ternaski Holland. My pronouns are she, her. Although currently we are in Vienna, Austria, I usually reside in New York, based in New York State, in New York City, which is the land of the Canarsie Lenape people. And before we jump into the panel and the project On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World, I'd love to invite my esteemed panelists to also introduce themselves. So go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you, Michaela. My name is Cynthia Lazarov. My pronouns are she, her. I live on the island of Kauai, the land of the native Hawaiian peoples, the original stewards of the land, and I'm really honored to be here today with all of you. I am a filmmaker, and I'm the founder of Nuclear Wake Up Call.Earth and Women Transforming Our Nuclear Legacy, which were born out of my experience that was life-changing of the Hawaii false alarm. So I'm very, very honored to be here with all of you today.
Thanks, Michaela. I'm Ray Acheson. My pronouns are they, them. I also live on Lenape and Canarsie land in New York City. And I'm the director of Reaching Critical Will, which is the disarmament program of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And I'm super honored to be part of this VR experience and learning about technology that I never thought I would use. So thank you for that.
No problem. So I actually represent an organization called Games for Change. Games for Change is a nonprofit organization also based in New York City. The title is in the name, or the mission is in the title. So the identity of the organization is built around the idea that play, gaming, interactivity, immersion are all bases for creating change in the world. They identify a couple verticals. The first vertical is health and wellness. The second vertical is education, which also involves curriculum. How do we also share the ability to create games, create experiences? The third vertical is civic and social impact. And did I say health and wellness already? Yes. Great. So I think I said them all. Basically, how this project, On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World, came to be is Princeton University's global security. Remind me the exact title.
The Program on Science and Global Security.
The Program of Science and Global Security came together with Games for Change and said they wanted to create a project about nuclear disarmament, specifically because of Alex Glazer, who's also in the audience. I'm just going to give him a quick shout out. So this project became a collaboration, and within this, there was a really clear conversation about how we approach the topic of nuclear disarmament with immersive technology. What are the boundaries? What are the level of showcasing that we do in VR? Because you are so intimate in virtual reality when you wear that headset, what is ethical? What is morally right to show? What is not sensationalizing the issue, but also not suppressing the immediacy of the issue? And these are some topics I think we're going to be able to talk about today. And so out of that conversation came the idea to do a documentary. A story about real-life people who went through real-life events and have been touched by the presence of nuclear weapons in a really visceral way. From that movement of deciding to create a documentary, they went on to work with Archer's Mark and Atlas V, which are two very well-known European companies, one specializing in documentary work, one specializing in immersive technology work. From there, they went on to receive additional funding, not only from the MacArthur Foundation, but also the BFI, and Arte France. So this project wasn't not just funded by large foundations, it was also funded by public media organizations, so people who were interested in the storytelling aspect. From there, the project was completed. It made its premiere at Sundance Film Festival for Chapter 1, and then from there, Chapters 2 and Chapters 3 premiered at South by Southwest. Since then, which is also a film festival in Austin, Texas. Since then, the project has been focused on what we call an impact campaign. This is when we take a piece of content that has been created and we think about not only, oh, great, we made a piece of content, we're putting it out into the world. We also think about how this content can make impact in really strategic ways. For example, the ICAN Nuclear Ban Forum, or at a high school, or at a university. So thinking about this impact campaign, there's a lot of things that work around it, and one of those things is something we call impact fellows. So I identify as an immersive storyteller, I identify as a producer and a creative strategist. I am not a nuclear weapons expert. But the wonderful thing about working within immersive technology is there's a deeply collaborative nature about it. And so I'm so excited to be able to say that I've been able to work very closely with Ray and Cynthia over the last few months as the Impact producer, because they are 2 of our 3 Impact Fellows that Games for Change has brought on, has paid to help give advice and expertise to how we make an impact with this piece of content. So that's to give you all the Marvel origin backstory. I hope I fit it into a very clean, clear, crisp idea. I want to first pass the mic over to Ray and ask Ray, how were you involved in the project? What was your sort of like first foray into VR and getting involved in On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World?
I got involved because Alex asked me to, basically. And he showed me an early cut of Chapter 1, and I was hooked immediately. I think it was only my second time doing VR, so I was very new to the technology. And I just thought it was an incredibly amazing, new, fresh way to talk about nuclear weapons. And I'd never seen anything like that before. So as soon as he asked me if I wanted to be involved in the project, I immediately said yes. And then I did an interview with the creators at Archer's Mark to get my voice over Zoom, because it was during the pandemic. And so I think I talked to Steve for about, or Mike rather, for about 2 hours. And from that, I think I'm in it for about 15 seconds, but it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. So I'm so proud no matter the role, because it really tells the whole story, not just about Hawaii, but the story of nuclear weapons and the story of how we get rid of nuclear weapons, which to me is the most important part. And so, yeah, that's how I got engaged. Thanks.
You're welcome. So as we know with the documentary work, again, we're talking about real life people. So I think the most important part to stress is that we did not choose to create like a simulation, right? We didn't choose to create a simulation of someone being exposed to a nuclear event. We didn't create a simulation of something that could be very heightened. We chose to go with the real life story of real life people. And in that way, I think we decided upon the event in Hawaii. And the way we came about that is because of Tamara Patton, who was also a part of the Princeton University program and had just recently received text messages from her friends and family that had just gone through the event about where should they go, what should they do, how are they going to get out of this. And so for anyone who's not familiar with the event on January 13th, 2018, I'd love to pass the mic over to Cynthia to also talk about her experience, because not only are both of these people featured in the experience of virtual reality, but Cynthia actually went through the event in Hawaii herself. So Cynthia, I'm going to allow you to take the mic.
Okay. Thanks, Michaela. So, I really got started with this back through Alex as well, because going through the Hawaii false alarm was a totally, as I said, life-changing, near-death experience for me, and nothing has ever been the same since. And I had a unique experience in that I was in the middle of making a film about nuclear dangers and had just been interviewing top experts in the US and Russia on nuclear risk. And so I had been awakened to all the different ways that things could go wrong. And it was Mikhail Gorbachev and Secretary of Defense Perry in the United States. And Secretary Perry had just said to me a few months before that, the nuclear risk today is greater than it was during the Cold War, and most people are blissfully unaware of this danger, and they were sleepwalking into a nuclear catastrophe. We must wake up. So all of this was present for me in the morning of January 13th, 2018, when we all got the text message, ballistic missile threat, inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter, this is not a drill. And so that's how I got involved in the project. I was interviewed for the project, and I wrote an article that interwove my experience being mindful of all the dangers and what it was like moment to moment for the 38 minutes, which became part of the inspiration for the project. So that's how I originally got involved, and now I'm really honored to be a fellow working with all of you.
Thank you, Cynthia. So one thing to stress again, it's not just that we made this story about a human focus, but it's also the fact that we pulled away from a materials focus, right? We didn't talk about, at the very beginning of the virtual reality experience, how many weapons are in the world, who has those weapons, why do they have those weapons. Instead, we decided to create a project that's universal, a project that features a mother, a project that features a person getting up to go to school, a project that features indigenous Hawaiians, people of non-indigenous Hawaiian descent. And so the reality is that by creating, I think, a more universal conversation with the documentary itself, we created an openness for people who watch chapter 1 to say, I want to watch chapter 2. I want to watch chapter 3. And from there, we go deeper and deeper into the history of chapter 2 really goes into the history of nuclear weapons. What was incredible about the event in Hawaii, as saddening as it is that there was also a Hiroshima survivor, a survivor of Hiroshima, who was in Hawaii at that time, which is chapter 2. And then chapter 3 goes on to talk about the future, where we highlight Ray and we highlight ICAN and we highlight the fact that people are not alone in this. We really want to make sure people don't walk away feeling hopeless, but hopeful by saying, hey, you don't have to start the movement. The movement is already happening. And you all in this space already know the movement is happening, but a lot of people out there don't. A lot of people out there don't. So I want to pass the mic back over to Ray and say, Ray, what surprised you about being a part of this project?
I think I was not surprised, but very gratified and overwhelmed by the positive response to it. Because VR technology is quite inaccessible for so many people and it's so new. And so people have been actively trying to seek out how to watch the film. And Games for Change has been amazing in sending the headsets around. So also you can talk to Michaela about how to get access to screen the film in ICAN partners around the world. But I think that for me, that was one of the things that I really appreciated was the new audiences that it was reaching. And one of the things that I worked on with Michaela and Aaron from Games for Change was building these aftercare surveys for people. So once you have the experience, we can connect you, if you're not an activist, to ICAN or to the divestment campaign or to the city's appeal or to the parliamentary pledge or to other things that you might be interested in your local community that relates to nuclear weapons. So having the opportunity to build all of that out, I don't think I was surprised by the response, but very, very grateful for it.
Cynthia, what surprised you?
Well, I have to say that as soon as the false alarm was over and we got the message that it was a false alarm, my first sort of feeling was gratitude, and then it was kind of like, I'm still here, we're all still here, we have a chance to get this right, we have a chance to eliminate nuclear weapons, we have a chance to do something, and this needs to be shared, and I want everybody to be able to experience this, I want people to be able to step into our shoes, and then along came, you know, On the Morning You Wake team, and what surprised me is it surpassed all my expectations, all my dreams of what it could be. People, you are in 360 for those of you who haven't seen it. You are in our shoes. You go through our experience. And as both Ray and Michaela have referenced, it's been so carefully and thoughtfully done to build on the experience, to care for the people who are going through it. So it minimizes the trauma, but it's still very impactful at the same time. And it also, for me, seeing it centered in the Native Hawaiian indigenous voice that's so beautifully and stunningly written by Jamaica Osorio was just, I didn't know that was going to happen. It's so brilliant and beautiful. So, and also the artisticness, that the filmmakers made it so, I think, stunningly beautiful. So all of that is beyond, and I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful. And then to be a fellow and to have the joy of working with you, it's just beyond.
Thank you. Thank you both. So yes, we're going to talk a little bit of shop. So for anyone who hasn't seen the experience, which by the way, it is screening right across those trees, those forest of trees we've all been sneaking through the last 2 days. It is screening right there. The experience itself is built upon a spoken word poem that Jamaica Osorio, who is an indigenous rights activist in Hawaii, who went through the events of January 13th as well, created. That is meant to really be the abstract artistry of the experience. It's what we call the spine. It's the backbone. It opens and closes every chapter, right? When we're talking about the human experience and the human experience of survival, sometimes the understanding logically is there, but there needs to be a visceral connection to it. And I think the spoken word poem, what it does really well is that it not only frames the horror of being woken up to that text message, but it also frames the larger colonialism and militarism that plagues Hawaii to this day in a very clear, very artistic form that makes you think about it. Even the title, On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World, is brought directly from that spoken word poem. So that's one kind of talk shop about artistry and how you can weave artistry into your content and still make your content appeal. It can still make your content engage. If anything, it allows people to think with the other side of their brain, right? Instead of just throwing them into this depth of facts and this depth of fear and this depth of this needs to happen tomorrow, you can pull them in through a totally different avenue, right? Swing them around the block and show them a different side of this topic. The second thing is the visuals of the actual experience. What's interesting is when we start at the beginning, it's very realistic. We try to be very like, this is Hawaii. And then once the alert gets brought in, we disintegrate the reality that people are living in, and we go into an atomic science-inspired particle reality. And the idea is that this idea is that the actual thematic of the visual, as people's calm and collectiveness are sort of destabilized, that the world that you're also viewing also destabilizes. So the particle effect is very specific, not only as an ode to atomic science, but also as an ode to the destabilizing effect emotionally that people are going through. So that's just to give you, if you're film here, if you like film, or if you're interested in sort of the artistry behind it, that's just give you a little sneak peek. But I also want to talk about this impact campaign, these wraparound materials. As an impact fellow, when you're talking to people about nuclear weapons, when you're talking to people about the disarmament movement, how do you maintain a level of comfortability with that person, right? Because when people get to a certain level of uncomfort, they walk away, right? They're like, they walk away. How do you keep people engaged when you're having conversations day to day, over email, in a large setting? What are some of like your tools that you use in your lives as activists and spokespeople? Cynthia, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think it's a really good question because it's a really fine line for all of us doing this work. How do you awaken and inspire and let people know what the enormous risks are, and how do you not paralyze people with fear and make them not want to have to just bury their heads in the sand and not bury their heads under their pillow or under the sand and not do anything? So for me, it comes back to what you mentioned. I connect as a mother, and I share my experience of what it was like for me. The moment where the nuclear threat became the most real for me was when I was racing to shelter in a cave, and I called my daughter in Los Angeles to say goodbye for what I thought might be the last time. And when she picked up the phone, I said, we've all gotten a message that we're going to be hit by a nuclear missile, and I just want you to know that I love you. And then she said, I love you too, Mom. It was that moment that makes it personal, makes it real, that everybody can connect to. It's universal. Everybody can imagine saying goodbye to your loved one for the last time, what that must be like. And it develops, it's an ownership thing. It brings it home. It brings it into our hearts. And my indigenous elder teacher on Hawai'i says the change that we need now is going to come from the heart. It's going to inform our heads, but the change is not just going to come from here. It's going to come from here. And so that's the way I try to do it, Michaela, is I try to really connect with people on a personal level as a mother, because we're all human beings, and we all have human feelings, and we all can imagine what it would be like to say goodbye. So,
yeah, if I could sum it up, it sounds to me like you approach it from authentic storytelling perspective, right? You're not fabricating a story about a mother. You're pulling it into the authentication that you had as a real life experience. And maybe at a certain point, we all know someone who's had that real life experience. And is that also like a way that we can wrap our arms, like hug sort of the entity that is the nuclear disarmament movement within these human authentic stories, and not shy away from the fact that we can all have a different voice, we can all have a different privilege background, we can all have a different country that our passport belongs to, but the humanity that connects us all, this will to survive, this will to thrive, is something that we can use as a comfortability creator. Because I always like to say, the work I do as an immersive storyteller, I've created experiences about gun violence. I've created experiences about drone surveillance technology. I always like to think about, how do I make someone comfortable enough to feel uncomfortable? right? Make them feel comfortable before you make them feel uncomfortable. And that's something I think we gently ease you into with On the Morning You Wake, sort of we kind of tick, tick, tick the roller coaster up, and then they receive the text message, and then the roller coaster sort of starts to take you on a ride. Not to trivialize it, but just to give you a sense that, the arc of storytelling, the arc of how you approach someone, even in your day-to-day life, can truly make an impact with those small ideas planted inside of you as you approach with authenticity and comfort and love. Ray, what about you? What are some of the tools you use?
I don't know. Do I make anybody feel comfortable? I'm not really sure that I do. But I think one of the ways that I try and approach it is always to not let go of hope. And that's always a big message from me, is that, yes, it's very dark and grim and scary, and we're living in a very challenging time where there's so many converging crises that we face every day. And really, we just have an obligation to work for positive change, and we also have all the tools that we need to make that positive change. And I think that's part of my story that I try to communicate. And I find that this VR experience is very useful for that, largely because of Jamaica's poem, actually, because it does connect up. It's not just about nuclear weapons. It's about the history of colonialism, the history of militarism, this situation that we've built for ourselves in our world that is a world where everyone turns reflexively to violence and to weapons to solve tensions and problems. And that we actually can build a different world if we let go of those myths and those dynamics and the material realities, the political economies that hold us into this world of militarized violence. We can get out of that. And I think that's the main story of On the Morning You Wake that I really cherish and love and try and promote. And I think I don't know if it makes people comfortable, but that's how I try and sell the story and sell the work and sell people on getting involved, because this is an exciting moment for all of us. It's a dangerous moment, but it's an opportunity and a chance for all of us to work collectively to shift the public mindset, to stigmatize nuclear weapons, and to build something that actually works for people in the world instead of the world we have today.
And this is why I love these two, because we have a very balanced panel today for you all, as you can see. But in this way, and maybe I sound too cliche, so feel free to stop me if I'm wrong. There is something about the power of immersion, and I'm not calling it empathy. This is really key for me as someone who comes from a virtual reality background. VR is not an empathy machine. I don't prescribe to that idea, because a very well-told story is an empathy machine. And you can tell a story in a lot of mediums. You can tell it with photography, filmmaking. You can tell it with your own mouth using spoken word. You can tell it in your own sector, in your own platform, in your own way. So anyone here who says, I'm an artist, yes, maybe you don't have $1 million budget to do VR, but your art can create an impact when it's done in a specific way that is authentic to you and authentic to the audience you're making it for, right? And I want to make sure that we all know that VR is not the ultimate tool. It's still just a vehicle. It's still just a methodology. And so in that way, I like to think maybe that in our current reality, it's very hard to see a different reality, right? We're so neck deep, waist deep in colonialism and militarism, especially as someone who might live in the US or the UK or in Europe. And the reality is that it's hard for us to see through that. And maybe, just maybe, there's virtual reality helps us see a little clearer when we create the reality we want to see, right? You can see the reality of someone who's been through a false ballistic missile alert, but is it also that ability to see it more clearly that heightens the understanding that there can also be a world we can strive to that looks different, sounds different, feels different for everyone who lives in it? And one thing I have been amazed is that this movement is totally led by badass women. And I love that. Or people who identify as female, or people who have a queer background, or people who have a background as indigenous, or an indigenous background, and I had no idea. Like, as someone who has just come into this movement maybe a couple months ago, when I came on to Impact produce this project, I said, great, I'm going to be working with a lot of educators who usually come from universities that are usually Ivy Leagues. I know what those people usually look like, and I've been so astounded by the power that I've seen in this space, and the people who have that power, the people who wear that power, and the people who speak to that power don't look like the people that I assumed were in this movement. And so I just want to say that it's been really inspiring for me. Moving into, I think, what's going to have to be some of our last few questions. One of the things that really Ray touched upon was this aftercare idea. We really try to onboard people to the technology so they feel comfortable with the technology, right? Ideally, whether it's your first time in VR or 20 times in VR, we give you a VR tutorial. We put you in the headset. Then we give you the aftercare survey. The amazing thing is about digital technology is that it's flexible, right? So we can change the survey that Ray built for us that was built for specifically South by Southwest audiences. With one click of a button, we can change it to be more specific to a New York-based audience. Are you based in New York? Yes. If they answer yes, it takes them to New York ICAN or NICAN. And if they answer no, then we take them to, well, what are you interested in learning about, right? So digital technology can be very flexible to your audience. For example, today, we have a question in our survey that says, do you want to take direct action? And if they do, it takes them to a totally different section of the survey, right? So the way that is, we're not just saying there's only one big organization for you to connect to. Here's all the subtle organizations. If you're interested in queer, there's ICAN. If you're interested in art, there's Bombshell Toe. If you're interested in policy, there's the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists and journalism. So I think there's a uniqueness in making it unique to the person, right? We're not saying there's a one-size-fits-all. We're saying there's a specific size that fits each person, and let's try to find that size. Let's do the work. Do the work, go a little extra to find the size that fits each person. So what I want to ask is, who is the person, who is the organization that you want to see watch On the Morning You Wake?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that working with this impact team, I've been so impressed with the care that's taken and the way that it's been tailored for each audience, and that the safe space is created for the people to go through the experience. I think it makes such a difference, and that it's connected to action. If that is something, every opportunity to be connected to action is there, whether you want to be, whether you express that interest, it's a possibility. So, and then you get really specific about where you can go. So I personally, still from my experience and the lens that I wear, having been through it, is that I want everybody to be able to see it. No matter where they come from or what their age, up to a point. But I think specifically for our audience, I see this as a tool that we can use in our work to awaken and inspire people. I come from, as an elder, I went through the 1980s, and I was there for the day after in 1983 in the fall, when 100 million of us watched that movie at the same time on the same night. And that movie really galvanized our movement. It changed the heart of our president, Reagan, who was committed to the largest nuclear arms buildup in history. And he had a change of heart and was, within 2 years, meeting with Gorbachev to talk about disarmament. So I want everybody to have this experience. And I think just as the day after was a tool for our movement, this can be the tool for 2022 with the technology, with the option to tailor it to different audiences. And it's a way to really awaken and inspire, and as Ray said, to bring hope that we can do something. We can do this. We're doing this. We can all make a difference. We all have agency. We can all actually, we are doing this, and we're going to get it done. And you can be a part of it, making history. So
I think one of the core audiences that I see this film really speaking to is those who are kind of on the fence about nuclear weapons. Your friends or your family who maybe think still that nuclear weapons offer some security. You know those people in your life that you have the really annoying conversations with over and over again, where they're like, well, what about this? And what about that? When you tell them that you work for nuclear abolition, those people are the ones that need to see this film, because I think it really gets to the heart in a very personal way, as Cynthia described, of what the actual lived reality is of living constantly under the threat of nuclear weapons. And the Hawai'i incident brought it to the fore, but we live under this exact same threat every single day since 1945. And we mostly just ignore it, and there's a mass delusion that it's not actually ever going to affect any of us personally, but it could at any moment. It could change. And I think that that's why for folks that are not really sure how they feel about nuclear weapons, this is a really great piece to touch them with.
Which is interesting, because when I was first brought onto this project at the end of 2020, my biggest hurdle as an impact producer was, oh gosh, how am I going to make people aware that nuclear weapons are still an issue and that they still exist and this isn't just some archaic idea that like there is like a nuclear end time, to suddenly in March, it was not about making sure people were aware that nuclear weapons exist, but making sure that the thing that we were telling them about nuclear weapons wasn't fear-mongering. Because at that time, as we all probably here are aware, Putin sent out a veiled threat, or not a veiled threat, to the rest of the world not to interfere with his invasion of Ukraine. And very quickly, I found myself changing the perspective of going from being on a megaphone to being a crisis communicator, and instead softening my communication and how we were going to communicate this to South by Southwest. We pushed our Nobel Peace Center activation down the line on the calendar from an April to a June, just to see where it all landed. So that being said, how are you? How are you feeling? How are you feeling about where we are in the world? And after we answer this question, I think we can pass it to the audience. I did see a question in the audience. Ray, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. I mean, it's always difficult as an abolitionist to answer that question because, you know, for a lot of people, like you said, this moment has been a big shift. For me, it hasn't. I've always known this is a possibility for as long as I've been doing this work, and the urgency for me has always been the same. But now there's this moment where we can speak to people about how they're feeling and connect them to the work so that they don't have to feel despair and that they don't have there's nothing that they can do to protect themselves or their families or their communities or their countries, and to really promote in this moment that nuclear abolition is the only answer. The answer cannot be more militarization. We have done that incessantly. That is the only answer we've ever turned to, is more weapons, more war to solve all the problems. This is what has gotten us into this current situation. And so to get us out of that situation, we need to go in a different direction. And that's the direction of nuclear abolition. It's the direction of demilitarization. And so for me, this is an opportunity to talk about those bigger concepts with people in this moment, and to not just let people get pulled into the fear of, oh, well, this one person might use nuclear weapons in this one situation.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Well, I think, you know, again, thinking as an elder and having spent decades of my life in U.S.-Soviet, now U.S.-Russia relations, this is definitely the hardest moment I've ever been through. I have to be honest about that, the most challenging moment. But I agree with Ray that it is a time, I think it's a planetary nuclear wake-up call. I think it's an opportunity for us to seize this moment, and this project has the potential to really serve in that way, to connect people that this is something that hasn't gone away, isn't going to go away until, as Ray says, we abolish nuclear weapons. The only way to eliminate the possibility of one person or 9 nuclear-armed countries from holding us hostage and unleashing nuclear Armageddon is abolition. It's just clear. And so I think that's the moment that we're in, is to bring hope that we can do this, and to give people, let them know that they can be part of a movement that's really exciting, that's changing the story, that we have the capacity to do this, that we all have agency, that we can all make a difference.
And my hope is that on the morning you wake to the end of the world is not some tentpole VR experience about nuclear weapons, and it's the only one. Like, my goal, my dream is to see anyone out there who's a creator, a storyteller, to be like, this new technology is epic. How do I tell this story using augmented reality? How do I tell a story I know with volumetric video capture? How is AI involved? How is the metaverse involved? Because the reality is that the world is moving at a very fast rate with digital reality and physical reality, and I want to see storytellers feel like they can break that ceiling, that intimidation around technology, to tell your stories, to have your stories out there. If you're a producer, if you're a funder, and you're looking to fund content, I don't want On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World VR be the one and only VR. Like, go find people who are also doing more VR experiences. Go find people who are doing more AR. Try to think about how we can not just approach the topic differently, which I know is what everyone keeps saying probably here, but also how do we tell the topic differently? How do we tell a medium that's different or innovative or interesting, like Pedro Reyes and his incredible public installation art. I don't want that to be just the one and only installation art we see that's impactful. I want to see a spectrum of art, a spectrum of VR. And that's what I hope today I can leave you all with. So thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you so much, Ray. Ray, I know you probably have to get going soon.
Yes.
Can we take one question from the audience and then we'll just... Cool. All right. I did see one audience question. Go ahead and stand up, just so I can hear you. Do you want my mic?
Thank you, Nick Cantrell. If you haven't seen it, I think it's a remarkable piece of work. I suggest everybody see it. My question really revolved around, is it available to bring to other areas? Like, I own a sustainable investment firm. If I want to have a client event and show it there and build an event around that in my area, is that a possibility?
I guess I should take this one.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. What we have right now is a demo of what we are having called VR kits. We have a Pelican case that fits 4 headsets, iPads, power strips. It's a one-and-done kit. We can create one for you and ship it to you. We can either have it on loan to you for a certain amount if you are willing to cover shipping, depending on the event, depending on the organization, and then you can ship it back to us, or we can create it for you. You can own it, you can keep it. So one big announcement I want to make is the 2 Pelican kits that Games for Change brought today. This has already been said and agreed upon, but ICAN will take those 8 headsets and they will own those 8 headsets, and they'll be able to ship those 8 headsets, use those 8 headsets in any way, shape, or form that they need to, as well as the 2 pop-up banners that we have. So we can create quick and easy demos, as well as activate different types of entities. We also, in the pipeline, have a 2D version, but that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. You can email us, wake@gamesforchange.org. I'm going to dismiss Ray, because I know Ray has to get going.
Thank you.
Not
Sorry.
that it's up to me whether you dismiss.
If anybody's interested, we're doing a panel discussion in the town hall on queer perspectives on nuclear weapons, featuring me, Jamila, if she's going to join, Carlos Umania, and Tim Wright. So that's where I have to run to. Really sorry about that.
No, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you so much.